Yathar Soneji, your camera is on. Very good. Okay, so we will study this numerical problem of open market operation. Everybody will do it. जो हम लोगों ने कल किया था, we will do it formally over here today. Then I will go to the graphical representation of this open market operation. How does it work in through reserves market? Uh, okay, the two problems we will do. First of all, this open market operation over here, and then something called sterilization that we are going to do today. Okay, anyway, so this is basically the problem. I think everybody should do it today. What happens to money supply and the composition of the balance sheet of the commercial bank and the central bank when central bank sells bond to the commercial bank worth rupees 100 in the process of conducting open market operation? Assume this R is basically RR. Okay, so required reserves RR. RR equals to 0.5 and CR equals to ER equals to 0. So basically this is the problem. And this is basically the initial balance sheet of the commercial bank and the central bank. Everybody should write it down or draw it in your exercise book so that we can do this problem and check what happens in the composition of the balance sheet and the money supply. So the problem is what happens to the money supply and the composition of the balance sheet of the commercial bank and the central bank when central bank sells bond to the commercial bank worth rupees 100 in the process of conducting open market operation. Throughout this problem, we will assume that the required reserves ratio is 0.5 and the currency reserve ratio and the excess reserves to deposit ratio is 0. So first thing is basically drawing these two balance sheet, the initial balance sheet of the commercial bank, initial balance sheet of the central bank. In the initial balance sheet of the commercial bank, liability side, D represents deposits. In the asset side, R represents reserves, B represents bond, loan is loan, asset equals to liability. Initial balance sheet of the central bank, liability, currency in circulation, which is obviously going to be 0 because I have assumed CR equals to 0, and reserves. In the asset side, we're going to have foreign exchange reserves, bond represented by B, loan, and gold reserves. So that's initial balance sheet of the commercial bank and the central bank. Everybody should draw it. Then we will go. We'll proceed. Namya Swarnkar. Namya Swarnkar.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
unmute yourself. So you will actually guide us how to do it. Uh, you're HSC student, right, Namya?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. So we are starting over here. That's the initial balance sheet. Then we will go to this changed balance sheet of the central bank. Namya, can you please tell me what is happening over here? What is the change balance sheet? What do we see? The changed balance sheet. And what change do we observe from the initial balance sheet of the central bank to the change balance sheet of the central bank? Central bank sells bond worth rupees 100 to commercial bank. That's the kind of open market operation central bank has done.
Yes, sir.
That's initial balance sheet of the central bank. That's the change balance sheet of the central bank. What change do you observe here?
Uh, that the bond is sell at 100
So
because
B change to B minus 100, right?
yeah.
And R falls down to R minus 100, right?
Hmm.
Okay. बाकी मैं नहीं दिखाऊंगा. Everybody should do it. Next part is what happened. What is going to be our changed balance sheet of the commercial bank? So next part, just like the way I have written over here, changed balance sheet of the central bank. Draw a changed balance sheet of the commercial bank. करके रखो. हम लोग देखेंगे what is going to be changed over there. Then I will show what is the change going to take place over there. So central bank is pretty easy. That bond falls down to 100 unit, and correspondingly reserves falls down to 100 unit. So the balance sheet is balanced, asset equals to liability, no problem. What is going to happen, Namya, to this balance sheet of the commercial bank?
I guess
There is nothing to guess.
I mean it's like in commercial it will be reverse minus 100 and uh, yeah.
So you say it will be R minus 100.
Yeah.
Okay. Then
Mm. Then B plus 100.
D plus 100. Okay.
B plus 100.
Okay. So R plus 100, D plus 100.
So I said R minus 100 and
R minus 100, D
plus 100. D will be 200
plus or minus?
plus.
Plus 100. Okay. Then is it balanced? Asset equals to liability हो रहा है. Is the balance sheet balanced?
Oh, no,
So
actually it should be minus in both.
minus in both. So you say R minus 100, D minus
100.
D minus 100
Hmm.
and balance, right?
Hmm.
Very good. That is the answer of Namya. Okay. Fine, Namya, you can actually mute yourself. Rohit Anand, would you mind unmuting yourself, Rohit?
Yes, sir. So I'm audible.
The same thing. Um, I think this changed balance sheet of the central bank is pretty easy, rightly done. B minus 100, R minus 100. Can you please tell me what is going to be the changed balance sheet of the commercial bank?
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Sir, right now I don't know.
Why?
Sir, I lost my connection during midway in the last class.
Yesterday.
I'm
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then nothing can be done.
I will have to follow up on that.
Okay. Very good. Do it. आज ही हो जाएगा. That is why I am repeating. कौन बोलेगा? अरे लविन टीटारे. Lavin. Lavin, would you mind unmuting yourself? Lavin Titari. I think Lavin is not here. He logged in and then he just simply left. Rahul Singh. Yeah. Rahul, can you please tell me what is going to be the changed balance sheet of the commercial bank?
यस सर सर पहले तो शायद कमर्शियल बैंक में R-100 हो जाएगा.
Okay. R minus 100. That means reserves falls by 100 units. That's pretty easy.
फिर तो डिपॉजिट 200 हो जाएगा.
200 increase करेगा.
नहीं डिक्रीज करेगा.
Decrease करेगा. So that is, it will be D minus 200, right? How did you calculate it?
डेल्टा R upon
RR.
डेल्टा. हाँ.
Okay. So now anything else? Because it's not still not balanced.
बॉन्ड मार्केट बॉन्ड्स पे +100 होगा और
Bond में plus 100 होगा.
लोन में -100 हो जाएगा.
Loan में minus 100 हो जाएगा. Right?
हाँ.
Let's see. मुझे तो ऐसे दिखा रहा है. लोन में तो -100 नहीं दिखा रहा है.
-200.
-200 अगर ना हो तो एसेट इक्वल्स टू लाइबिलिटी बैलेंस कैसे होगा? R minus 100 and B plus 100. 100 तो कैंसिल आउट हो गया एसेट साइड में. But liability side has already decreased by 200 unit. Asset side has to decrease by 200 unit. What is the option? Loan has to decrease by 200 units, right? So this is basically a changed balance sheet of the commercial bank when this open market operation takes place. Rohit, ठीक है? Rohit Anand? Is this connection okay today, Rohit? I think the same problem. I cannot hear Rohit. Anyway, this is it. Then there is a reduction in reserves by 100 unit. That implies as a reduction in total deposit D by 200 unit. Note, money supply is currency in circulation plus D. In our case, in this simple situation, I have assumed currency in circulation is 0. So this M equals to D. So delta M equals to delta D. Delta D is negative 200. So the money supply is going to decrease by 200 unit. And there is another way we can actually get the same thing. The delta M equals to 1 over RR delta H, high powered money. High powered money is basically delta H equals to delta R. So delta R is basically negative 100. So if I put negative 100 over here, I'm going to get the money supply is getting reduced by the 200 unit. Same thing. You can calculate in this fashion or you can calculate in this fashion. So this is open market operation where central bank sells bond to commercial bank by 200 unit, by 100 unit, and money supply actually reduces by 200 units. This is basically a numerical example what is going on over here. The intuition is it reduces high powered money, and when the high powered money falls down, money supply falls down because money supply is money multiplier multiplied by high powered money. And since money multiplier is greater than 1, so if high powered money reduces by 1 unit, the high power the money supply reduces by more than 1 unit. Over here in this example, high powered money reduced by 100 units. As a result, money supply got reduced by 200 unit. This is numerical example. So let us go to a graphical exposition of this open market operation. And to do that, we'll concentrate on reserves market. This graph is visible, right? reserves market, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Graph is visible. Okay, so here what we have done, we have represented reserves market through reserves demand and reserves supply. So this blue line initially negatively sloped, and then the horizontal portion denoted by capital RD representing reserves demand curve of the economy, and the other curve which is vertical initially, then there's a horizontal portion denoted by RS. This is my reserve supply curve. We are measuring interest rate, which is federal fund rate or my repo rate over here in the y-axis, and we are measuring reserves, quantity of reserves R in the x-axis. Reserves demand curve, reserve supply curve. So let me explain individually why does this reserves demand and reserve supply curve looks like in this fashion. Let us first concentrate on this negatively sloped portion of reserves demand curve. It basically says when interest rate rises, reserves falls. And this NBR is basically known as the non-borrowed reserves. There are two types of reserves. There's a borrowed reserve, there's the non-borrowed reserves. Borrowed reserves कहाँ से आता है? Central bank से borrow करता है commercial bank. When they borrow something from the central bank, then the borrowed reserves comes. We will see that when the borrowed reserves come. Initially, in this example, in this simple diagram, there is no borrowed reserves. I only have non-borrowed reserves. And non-borrowed reserves, one of the source of getting non-borrowed reserve is the open market operation. We have seen that when central bank sells or purchase bond, reserves changes, and that is basically non-borrowed reserves. The reserves actually reflected in the balance sheet of the central bank and the commercial bank just through market transaction. That is non-borrowed reserves. Okay, so this negatively sloped portion of this reserves demand curve says that when interest rate rises in the economy, reserves falls. What is the intuition of that? Can anybody tell me? When interest rate rises in the economy, it basically says that commercial bank is going to hold less reserves. Can anybody tell me what is the intuition of this negatively sloped portion then, that why commercial bank hold less reserves when interest rate in the economy rises? Kartikeya?
So they would want to give out loans so that like when there is high interest rate,
Yeah,
like their earnings would be more.
their earning can be increased by giving more loans, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you are correct. एक चीज मुझे नवोलिन बोलो, why does a bank keep reserves? Reserves hold क्यों किया जाता है? Especially excess reserves क्यों hold करता है? What is the purpose of holding reserves?
So to supply whenever like
Demand for what?
demand for money,
Money,
like capital.
capital. सोच के बोल, anybody can answer. What is the purpose of holding reserves by the commercial bank?
To fulfill the daily withdrawal requirements.
To fulfill the daily withdrawal requirement. Withdrawal at what? Deposit, right?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So that is the purpose of holding reserves, जो मैं पहले बोलना भूल गया था. But that part of the answer of Nabulin is correct, that when the market interest rate rises, it is obviously beneficial for the commercial bank to give more loans than keeping reserves, because they can earn interest out of it. So that is why this is the negatively sloped portion of this reserves demand curve. And there's a horizontal portion over here. Okay. The term that written over here, IER, is basically interest rate on excess reserves. That means, suppose central bank says that you have to keep, let's say, 50% of your deposit at reserves, and if you keep more than 50%, which is these excess reserves, central bank is going to give you an interest, IER, on that. So over here, central bank is actually encouraging, when IER is positive, central bank is actually encouraging you to keep reserves, excess reserves. So what basically says, my market interest rate cannot go below that, below excess reserves, because whenever my market interest rate I touches IER, commercial bank is not going to give any loans, and they will keep interest IER. So whatever deposit they'll have, they'll just simply keep interest out of that, because if they give loan, they're going to get interest lower than IER. They're not going to give loan at all. So interest rate cannot go below IER. So IER is basically the floor of interest rate. What's this? Somebody waiting in the lobby or what? So that is basically the intuition of this reserves demand curve. The negatively sloped portion says, whenever your market interest rate is above IER, then interest rate rises. Instead of keeping reserves, you just give more loans, you earn more interest. But whenever your when your nominal interest rate I is trying to go below IER, you're not going to give any loans, you'll actually hold infinite amount of excess reserves. That's the horizontal portion of the demand curve. So in effect, this IER is basically the floor of nominal interest rate. Nominal interest rate cannot go below that. So when IER is positive, means central bank is encouraging commercial bank to hold more excess reserve. And this actually the situation when the crisis comes up, the liquidity crisis comes up, 2007-2008 crisis, this IER becomes positive in USA. IER is still zero for India, but USA, after this 2007-2008 crisis, that actually started giving some sort of extra positive interest when a commercial bank hold excess reserves. It actually solves the problem of liquidity in the economy, and also it also solves the problems of liquidity trap, that nominal interest rate going zero, because as I explained, the nominal interest rate is basically the floor of the nominal interest rate in this diagram is IER. So if I set IER something positive, the nominal interest will never go to zero. It basically solves that problem, and I will explain to that more detail. So this introduction of positive IER is basically coming from the Federal Reserve Bank of US, and this is the new introduction from 2007-2008 crisis, where when US actually faces both the problem, liquidity crisis and the liquidity trap. Nominal interest are very close to zero and the market is out of liquidity. So what Federal Reserve Bank did, so they have to encourage commercial bank to hold more reserves to solve the liquidity problem, and they also do not want nominal interest to go below zero or near zero. So they actually keep they given this one positive interest on excess. So that positive interest on excess solves both the purpose. It works as a floor of nominal interest rate, and it also encourages keep more liquidity in the economy. So this is my reserves demand curve, negatively sloped when nominal interest is above IER, and when nominal interest at IER, you just simply hold infinite amount of reserves. IER is the floor of nominal interest rate. Clear, Novolin? समझ में आया?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Okay. There's an IER over here in the y-axis at the floor, and there's an ID over here. Okay, that is my discount rate or repo rate. This is the rate at which commercial bank can borrow fund from central bank. Why do they need that? That when they feel that they do not have enough reserves to meet the daily withdrawal requirement, or they also want to give more loans to, let's say, there's a more loan demand and do not have enough fund, they sometimes borrow from commercial bank. And also commercial bank also borrow from each other, right? And when they feel that I'm not going to repay, they also borrow from the central bank. So the interest rate central bank charge the commercial bank when the borrowing requirement for the commercial bank comes up is ID, which is discount rate and in USA, and which is repo rate in India. What this supply curve says that when your market clearing interest rate is below ID, but not going to borrow any fund from the central bank. Why? Suppose ID is 10%. Central bank says, if you want to borrow from me, you have to give me an interest 10%. And the market clearing interest rate is something, market prevailing interest is something like 5%. You said, no, the market interest rate is 5%. You go and offer 5% to central bank is not going to borrow or not going to lend anything to you. So when your market interest rate is below ID, cannot borrow anything from the central bank. But when market clearing interest rate at ID, you can borrow infinite amount from the central bank. Can market interest rate go above ID? No, because when market interest rate goes above ID, just simply go to the central bank and borrow fund from the central bank at ID, and the market interest rate will become ID. So ID over here is basically the ceiling of nominal interest rate. Floor of market interest rate is IER, ceiling of market interest rate ID, and interest rate should lie between this ID and IER over here. Okay, so again, what is the intuition of this L-shaped supply curve? And when your market interest is below ID, okay, I do not borrow anything from the central bank. So all my reserves is non-borrowed reserves when market interest rate is below ID. And when market interest is at ID, I can borrow infinite amount from the central bank. So that's the horizontal portion of my reserve supply curve. So corresponding to any point on the horizontal portion of the reserve supply curve, if I draw a vertical line to x-axis, whatever I get above non-borrowed reserves is the borrowed reserves. Whatever I get above non-borrowed reserves is the borrowed reserves. Okay, and this intersection point of this reserves demand and reserve supply is going to give me the market clearing reserves in the economy, in the entire banking system, and the corresponding market clearing interest rate. So this is the diagram you see where you can concentrate more on the reserves market in detail. Clear? Priyanksha?
Yes, sir. Sir, ID is the repo rate, right?
ID is the repo rate,
So is IER
is
can
the
be
interest rate on
reverse
excess
repo rate?
reserve. No, no,
Okay, okay. They are different.
they're absolutely different. For India, there is no IER, interest rate on excess reserves. India में वो zero है. So Indian
Yes, sir.
Reserve Bank does not encourage, you can say, commercial bank to hold excess reserves. From before 2007, 2008 crisis, even US Federal Reserves did not encourage commercial bank of US to do it.
Sir, if they are excess reserves, then they are present with the commercial banks, right?
But commercial, where do they keep it? They will keep it in the central bank only, right?
Okay,
Reserves
okay.
कहाँ पे रखा जाता है? All the commercial banks, they have an account in the central bank. वो reserves वहाँ पे रखा जाता है.
Yes, sir, but in those accounts, they keep only the fraction that is
No,
necessary for them.
everything, all the reserves,
Okay,
both required reserves and excess reserves, जो भी तुम रखोगे वो उस account में जमा होगा.
okay. But the central bank gives interest only on the necessary reserves that it keeps and not on the excess.
No. Central bank gives interest on excess reserves only. Necessary reserves तुम्हें रखना ही पड़ेगा.
But in
Whether you
India, they don't give interest on any of them.
No, in India they do not give interest on excess reserves. Necessary reserves के ऊपर interest देने का कोई बात ही नहीं हो रहा है. You have to keep it. That's the rule. But if you keep above that amount in US from 2007 2008 onwards, they are actually giving you some interest. Commercial bank. So commercial bank is earning some interest. But for India,
Okay,
so that is why it is interest on excess reserves.
yes, sir, got it.
What is the purpose? 2007 2008 crisis, there's a huge liquidity crisis. अगर excess reserves के लिए मैं encourage करूं तो liquidity crisis हल हो सकता है. And also the interest rate in 2007 2008 onward in US is close to zero. So if I keep some positive interest on excess reserves, as this figure explains, it actually works as a floor of interest rate. So I can actually also solve that problem. That is the purpose, the dual purpose actually. So if I give positive interest exchange, both the purposes are solved. Fine, Priyangsha?
Yes, sir, it's fine.
It's fine. Very good. So that's the thing. That's market clearing. The intersection point is going to give you this market clearing interest rate, which is denoted by IFF star over here, and the market clearing reserves over here. You see the market clearing interest rate in this diagram is well below ID. So whatever reserves commercial bank or the entire banking system has in this diagram is all non-borrowed reserves coming from open market operation only. So that is why it is denoted by NBR. Okay, now we're going to see graphically what happens to this graph when this open market operation takes place. This diagram. So this is the positive open market operation, you can say, where the central bank actually purchase bond from the commercial bank. Central bank purchase bond from the commercial bank. What happened graphically over here, this graph, this panel A, the reserve supply curve shifts to the rightward. Initially, it was this blue reserve supply curve, RS1. Now it is the red reserve supply curve, RS2. Horizontal portion does not change at all because market clearing interest rate is still below ID. So there is no change in the horizontal portion. But reserve supply shifts. What is the implication of that? You see the first implication when we have already seen yesterday or over here also that when central bank purchase bond from the commercial bank, reserves rises, and you see this is a rise in the reserves, which is a rise in the non-borrowed reserves. And what is the implication of that? The interest rate falls down. How do you explain that? That when non-borrowed reserves rises, high-powered money rises, money supply rises, LM curve shifts downward, nominal interest rate goes down. That's basically through ISLM. The same thing is happening over here. Non-borrowed reserves rises, interest rate goes down. Why? When non-borrowed reserves rises, why interest rate goes down? Because when non-borrowed reserves rises, high-powered money rises, money supply rises, LM curve shifts downward. That is why interest rate goes down. It's basically coming from money supply, money demand interaction, जो बाद में और भी clear होगा. So this is open market operation, positive open market operation, when central bank purchase bond from the commercial bank. यथार्थ सोने जी?
यस सर।
समझ में आया?
हाँ सर।
और न्यूमेरिकल एग्जांपल जो हमने देखा और ये जो ग्राफ जो देखा, they are actually making sense, right?
यस सर, नाउ दे आर।
अच्छा यथार्थ, can you tell me what does this panel B over here representing?
इंक्रीज इन क्वांटिटी ऑफ रिजर्व्स।
ठीक से बोलो. You see over here, concentrate on this market clearing interest rate over here. Initially in the panel A, the market clearing interest rate was IFF1 and the reserves were NBR1. Open market operation takes place. The commercial bank purchase from the central bank, central bank purchase from the commercial bank. Market clearing interest rate goes down from IFF1 to IFF2. Non-borrowed reserves rises from NBR1 to NBR2. High powered money rises, money supply rises, and we are absolutely fine. What is happening over here? ठीक से देखो, इसको कंपेयर करो, पैनल ए और पैनल बी कंपेयर करो, देखो क्या हो रहा है.
सर द इंटरेस्ट रेट कैन नॉट फॉल फर्दर।
एक्सप्लेन करो, ठीक से एक्सप्लेन करो, जैसे मैं पैनल ए को एक्सप्लेन किया. There was the initial point of interaction. There's the initial blue line, reserve supply, reserves demand, initial equilibrium point 1, market clearing interest at IFF1, NBR1, reserves. Open market operation takes place. Central bank purchase bond from the commercial bank. Reserves rises. So this reserve supply curve shifts rightward. Market clearing point is 2.2 over here, with the market clearing interest at IFF2, reserves NBR2. Implication, rise in money supply. ऐसे इसको एक्सप्लेन करो पैनल बी को. पहले क्या था, ओपन मार्केट ऑपरेशन के बाद क्या हुआ, व्हाट इज द इम्प्लीकेशन?
सर पहले इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट 1 पे फ्लैट लाइन के ऊपर था इक्विलिब्रियम।
What is the market clearing interest rate? Sorry, what was the market clearing interest rate? IFF1 equals to IER, right?
Yes sir.
Now open market operation takes place. As usual, reserve supply curve shifts from RSS1 to RSS2. Where is the market equilibrium now? At point
2.
What is the market clearing interest rate?
IER.
So IFF2 is also IER. So there is no change in the market clearing interest rate, but there is a rise in NBR, right?
Yes sir.
Open market operation has taken place, reserves rises, but in this situation, the situation explained in panel B, no change in interest rate. What is the implication? जो मैं implication यहाँ पे मैं बोला हूँ, जो in this panel A, implication is rising money supply. What is the implication here?
Sir, only the reserves rises.
Money supply
Remains the same.
How is it possible?
So the interest rate is same.
There is no in the money supply. Do you have an interest rate over here? In this money supply equation, is there any interest rate over here? Ultimately, money multiplier, high powered money, that determines money supply. So reserves rises mean high powered money rises. The money supply is going to rise anyway. उसमें तो कोई problem नहीं होना चाहिए. Money supply is going to rise. Reserves rises.
Oh yes sir.
High powered money rises. Money supply rises. Implication उसके बाद आएगा.
Sir, market clearing rate.
Interest rate does not change. What is happening? ये तुम लोग देखे हो.
Liquidity trap.
Liquidity trap. उसमें क्या होता है?
इंटरेस्ट रेट चेंज नहीं हो सकती एक पॉइंट
चेंज नहीं हो सकती है. ISLM डायग्राम में उसको हम लोग कैसे रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं? Where does this intersection between IS and LM takes place?
Hmm.
हुआ है? Is it been covered at all?
Sir, I'm unable to recollect it. Just a minute.
Anybody can answer actually.
So flat part of LM.
Flat part of the LM curve. And when the money supply rises, the flat part of the LM curve does not change. So the intersection point between ISM and LM does not change. So interest rate output does not change at all. The same thing is over here. यहाँ पे output दिखाई नहीं दे रहा है because we are concentrating on reserves market in this diagram. But ultimately the same thing. Money supply rises, open market operation has taken place, reserves has increased, high powered money has increased, money supply has increased, but that money supply has no impact on the economy at all. Interest rate completely remain unchanged. यहाँ पे है पैनल ए में देखो, money supply rises, interest rate falls down, and that going to increase my output through private investment. यहाँ पे ये प्रॉब्लम, पैनल बी में प्रॉब्लम दूसरा है. Money supply rises, that the rise in money supply is not able to reduce interest rate further. Interest rate is not going down further. As a result, private investment is not increasing. Private investment is not increasing, means output is not increasing. So panel B is a completely ineffective monetary policy. Here the monetary policy is same, open market operation has taken place, but it's completely ineffective. It is not affecting output or employment. Panel A, effective monetary policy, expansionary. So open market operation has taken place, central bank purchase bond from the commercial bank, high powered money rises, money supply rises, interest rate has fallen down, output rises, employment rises. So this panel A is an effective monetary policy. And the thing is, when my market clearing interest rate is above the floor, which is IER over here, set IER equals to 0, then the floor becomes 0. So when the market clearing interest rate is above the floor, monetary policy is effective. Monetary policy through open market operation is effective. But when the market clearing interest rate is at the floor, then the monetary policy with open market operation is not effective. We have seen that through ISLM. The same is represented over here. This is known as a liquidity trap. And this is basically this panel B is the representation of US and different developed countries from 2007 to 2014-15. And also from 2014-15, they are out of liquidity for tap for a couple of years. Then again, this COVID crisis, they want to stimulate the economy by reducing nominal interest rate. So again, that nominal interest is at the floor. Okay, Japan is a prime example. From late 1990s, Japan nominal interest rate is at the floor. Okay, so Japan has been a liquidity trap kind of situation with ineffective monetary policy through open market operation. That's the graphical representation in the reserves market scenario, liquidity trap, and you know what is there in the. Interesting to see over here, these diagrams and ISLM, they're actually representing the same story. Just like when this monetary policy is completely effective through open market operation, ISLM also says my nominal interest rate should go down, LM curve shifting down, nominal interest rate going down, and that stimulate private investment and output. The same thing is over here. Reserves rises, nominal interest rate going down. ISLM represents liquidity trap when the nominal interest at the floor, in the intersection between ISM and LM happening at the floor of LM, at the horizontal part of the LM. You increase money supply, you conduct open market operation, increase money supply. That intersection between IS and LM and the horizontal part does not change. Interest does not change, output does not change. The same thing is happening over here. Open market operation taken place, reserves rises, high powered money rises, money supply rises, but it's completely ineffective because it's unable to affect interest rate. Hence, it's unable to affect private investment. Hence, it is unable to affect output and employment. right? Any question? Sneha?
So,
Any question? Is it
no,
clear?
yes, sir.
Clear, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. अच्छा स्नेहा मैं बार बार जो बोल रहा हूँ for this effective monetary policy and ineffective monetary policy, the money supply rises, interest rate goes down, it stimulates private investment and stimulate output and employment. ये वाला जो लिंक है इंटरेस्ट रेट टू इन्वेस्टमेंट टू आउटपुट, ये वाला लिंक मुझे कहां से मिल रहा है? Which equation is giving me that link? Because money supply rises, interest rate goes down. ये तो यहां से मिल रहा है मुझे. Fine, very good. My reserves rises, high powered money rises, money supply rises, and this graph also tell me that my interest is going down. My ISLM says that if LM curve is down, my interest rate goes down. But उसके बाद जो link मैं बार बार बोल रहा हूँ, interest rate going down, private investment rising, output rising, employment rising. That is the expansionary monetary policy. Expansion कैसे हो रहा है? Output expand कर रहा है. ये वाला जो लिंक मुझे कहां से मिल रहा है? इंटरेस्ट रेट टू इन्वेस्टमेंट टू आउटपुट टू एम्प्लॉयमेंट. स्नेहा
So, can you please repeat your word?
अच्छा ये जो फिगर तुम देख रहे हो पैनल ए में दिखाई दे रहा है, राइट? पैनल ए, दिस फिगर. स्नेहा, स्नेहा, कैन यू हियर मी? I think Sneha has a problem. Connectivity problem.
Yes.
Now I can hear you. ये जो पैनल ए तुम देख रहे हो, open market operation has taken place. Central bank purchased bond from the commercial bank. As usual, the high powered money has increased because the reserves has increased and money supply has increased. The panel A says when the reserves rises, who's this? किसी और को पूछते हैं. प्रियांशा.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Is my question clear to you? यहाँ पे देखो effective monetary policy में क्यों बोल रहा हूँ? Reserves has increased, high powered money has increased, money supply has increased, interest rate gone down. What is the implication of that? Interest rate
Output
gone
will
down.
increase
How does the output increase?
by the IS curve. No,
By the
like not no sir, not the IS curve. Uh, Sir, there is a inverse relation between interest rate and output, right? So
why? कैसे? वो inverse relation कहाँ से मिलता है? इंटरेस्ट रेट और आउटपुट का जो इनवर्स रिलेशन तुम बोल रहे हो,
yes, sir.
वो कहाँ से मिलता है? क्यों देता है? व्हाट इज द इंट्यूशन ऑफ दैट? इंटरेस्ट रेट और आउटपुट के बीच में और भी एक वेरिएबल है,
Investment
हाँ. तो इंटरेस्ट रेट अगर फॉल करे तो इन्वेस्टमेंट का क्या होगा?
increase,
इंक्रीज. इन्वेस्टमेंट अगर इंक्रीज करे तो जीडीपी का क्या होगा?
increase.
बिकॉज वाई इक्वल्स टू सी प्लस आई प्लस जी, राइट?
Yes, sir.
आई राइजेस, वाई राइजेस.
Yes, sir. Investment rises, why
And
rises?
you are correct. That's my goods market equilibrium or the IS negatively sloped R and Y. क्यों? When R falls, I rises, Y rises. यहाँ पे देखो, money supply rises means I falls, implication I will rise, Y will rise. That's the expansionary monetary policy, effective expansionary monetary policy.
Yes, sir.
Output expand कर रहा है. यहाँ पे तुम
Yes,
यहाँ
sir,
पे
and
problem.
that comes from the IS curve as well because that's downward
That's
sloping.
not IS curve as well. IS curve तो वही represent करता है. The inverse
Yes,
relationship
sir.
between Y and R कहाँ से आता है? When R falls, I rises, Y rises. यही IS curve है.
Yes, sir. That's what.
और यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है? पैनल बी में you are increasing money supply, but interest rate is completely ineffective. चेंज नहीं कर रहा है. When the interest rate is not changing, investment is not changing, output is not changing. Monetary policy is ineffective. यहाँ पे effective क्यों है? Money supply increase कर रहा है, high powered money rising, money supply rising, interest rate is falling down, investment rises, output rises. यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है? Reserves rising, money supply rising, interest rate is not changing, hence investment is not changing, output is not changing. So when my interest rate is the floor, the monetary policy is completely ineffective. ये हम लोग ISLM में भी देखे हैं. अगर मैं पैनल A ISLM में रिप्रेजेंट करूं क्या होगा? Money supply rises, open market operation takes place, reserves rises, high powered money rises, money supply rises, LM shifts down. When the LM shifts down, implication is interest rate falls, output rises. Effective monetary policy, expansionary. But when the intersection between IS and LM is at the horizontal portion of LM, you keep on increasing money supply, the intersection between IS and LM does not change. Interest rate completely unchanged. As a result, investment unchanged. As a result, output unchanged. Ineffective monetary policy. ठीक है, स्नेहा, प्रियांशा.
Yes, sir, I got disconnected.
Okay. Priyansha, is it fine? Is this explanation
Yes,
fine,
sir.
Priyansha?
Yes, sir. It's
Okay.
fine.
अभी दूसरे स्टेप में जाओ. बार बार मैं बोल रहा हूँ, आउटपुट एक्सपेंड कर रहा है, एम्प्लॉयमेंट एक्सपेंड कर रहा है. कहां से आ रहा है? आउटपुट एंड एम्प्लॉयमेंट का रिलेशन कहां से मुझे मिल रहा है?
So when interest rate falls, there will be more demand for loans, and there will be more investment. Therefore, the output and employment will increase.
आउटपुट राइज, एम्प्लॉयमेंट कहां से आ रहा है? यहाँ पे तो इन्वेस्टमेंट अगर इंक्रीज करे, वाई इंक्रीज कर रहा है फ्रॉम द डिमांड साइड. दैट्स माय आईएस, दैट्स माय national income identity. Y equals to C plus I plus G. When interest rate falls, I rises, Y rises. That's the demand side. Fine. आउटपुट इंक्रीज कर रहा है, मुझे समझ में आ रहा है. एम्प्लॉयमेंट कहां पे है यहाँ पे?
So production, sir.
बोलो, कोई कौन बोल रहा?
So production increase होगा तो
प्रोडक्शन कहां
labor,
से इंक्रीज? Which equation is the production function?
yeah, production function.
So when Y
Suppose-
rises,
हाँ,
employment rises. That's the production function. You have to employ more labor,
yes.
right? So when this, देखो कैसे हो रहा है? When money supply rises, interest rate falls down, investment rises, Y rises. This is the demand side. People started demanding more output. Supply कहां से आ रहा है? Farm will employ more labor and supply more output, so that extra demand जो created हुआ money supply increase से of goods and services, that gets mitigated through extra production. And to get extra production, you have to employ more labor. So demand and supply दोनों यहाँ पे interact कर रहा है. So let me explain another time what is happening over here. Initial equilibrium 1, interest rate IFF 1, reserves NBR 1. Open market operation takes place. Central bank purchase bond from the commercial bank. Implication, reserves rises from NBR 1 to NBR 2. Reserve supply curve shifts to the right. Reserves rises. High powered money rises. Money supply rises. Implication, interest rate falls down. यहाँ से भी interest rate falls down. ISLM से भी जाओ, LM curve going down, interest rate falls down. Impact, private investment rises, Y rises. That's the demand side of the story. Firm has to produce so that the goods market comes into equilibrium. जो तुम extra output demand कर रहे हो उसको supply किया जाए. Firms employ more labor to supply. Employment rises. So when money supply rises, output and employment both rises. That's the over here. That's panel A. What is happening over here? Money supply rises because the reserves has increased. Interest rate is completely ineffective. Change नहीं हो रहा है. Investment change नहीं हो रहा है. Output change नहीं हो रहा है. That means you are not demanding more output. Firm is not supplying more output. That means firm is also not employing more labor. Completely ineffective. Clear, Navonil?
Yes, sir.
And this is complete Keynesian. ISLM जो तुम देखते हो, it is called the simple partial Keynesian. Demand side represent करता है. Only demand side gets represented through ISLM. But when you integrate ISLM to production and the labor demand and labor supply, it becomes complete Keynesian. So complete Keynesian और means से ये story आता है. ISLM and production सब कुछ मिला के. Only ISLM में concentrate करो, वहाँ पे employment, there is no employment there. IS curve में भी employment नहीं है, LM curve में भी employment नहीं है. If you really want to see what is happening to employment, and especially price level inflation, जो supply aggregate supply curve में है price level, complete Keynesian has to come into picture. यहाँ पे जो क्या होगा? What is the implication of this extra money supply over here? If you concentrate on complete Keynesian, the aggregate demand curve of the economy will shift up, price level will shift up. There are going to be initial inflation. Extra inflation means low unemployment. That's Phillips curve. Same thing. Employment rises. Complete Keynesian. Simple Keynesian से होगा नहीं. And that is why I always praise my student to read complete Keynesian from Branson or Mankiw. वो GS Gupta से होगा नहीं. GS Gupta is a note type book जो initially ठीक है, and this is meant for these MBA students. But somebody who is doing MSc in economics or MA in economics, GS Gupta is not a good book to carry on. उसके बाद भी तुम्हें जाना पड़ेगा, because the complete Keynesian is not covered over there. ठीक है, और भी हम लोग देखेंगे. तो दिस इज बेसिकली ओपन मार्केट ऑपरेशन. हम लोग न्यूमेरिकली भी देखा, बैलेंस शीट में क्या हो रहा है, ग्राफिकली भी देखा, एंड देन एक्चुअली एंड ISLM से कंपेयर भी किया. ये ग्राफ जो देख रहे हो रिजर्व मार्केट ISLM, एक्चुअली गेटिंग द सेम स्टोरी and how is monetary policies affecting over there. Okay, any question? Anybody, any question? Kavya?
Yes, sir.
ठीक है, समझ में आ रहा है?
Yes, sir. Trying to digest it.
Trying to digest it. अच्छा, ये अभी तक जो मैं बोला हूँ ये तो मैक्रो में ही हो गया है, राइट? मोस्ट ऑफ द थिंग.
Yes, sir.
तो डाइजेशन में तो प्रॉब्लम होना नहीं चाहिए.
Sir, I don't means that completely remembered means need to refresh once.
ठीक है, इसलिए मैं बोला हूँ माय स्टूडेंट विल टेक a course, a lecture actually on ISLM complete Keynesian. एक आएगा. So this is basically open market operation, and interesting to see over here, if we compare these two diagrams, it basically says that your monetary policy through open market operation is completely ineffective when your nominal interest rate is at the floor. Okay, so this is exactly what I have explained over there. The open market purchase of bond shifts reserve supply curve to right. There is an increase in the non-borrowed reserves and increase in the money supply. Interest rate falls, causes consumption and investment to rise. That is my ISLM, because LM curve is going down, interest rate falls. Both consumption and investment is going up. It causes income and price to increase. Income means Y rises, and since there's aggregate demand rises, we have aggregate demand curve and the aggregate supply curve of the economy. Aggregate demand rises in the Y-axis. I'm measuring price. The price will going to rise, and this output rises means employment also rises. Open market purchase is an expansionary monetary policy, and that is expansionary monetary policy. And the numerical example that I have given when central bank purchase bond from the commercial bank is expansionary monetary policy, because it's going to increase income and employment. That's over here. An ineffective open market operation, when the open market purchase a bond shifts, the The reserve supply curve shifts to the right. There's increase in the non-borrowed reserves and increase in the money supply, but the interest rate does not change and keeps the output unchanged. So interest rate is not changing, investment not changing, output not changing, both demand. And also when the demand for output is not changing, the supply of output is also not changing. As a result, employment does not change at all. Price level also does not change at all. And अच्छा फिलिप्स कर्व याद है?
Yes, sir.
फिलिप्स कर्व में कौन सा दो वेरिएबल का रिलेशनशिप हम लोग देखते हैं? इन्फ्लेशन एंड
Inflation
अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट,
and
राइट?
unemployment.
अच्छा, सो अगर मनी सप्लाई इंक्रीज करे, it creates inflation because the aggregate demand curve is going up. What is happening to unemployment? Going up or going down?
Going down.
Going down. What happens to employment then?
Going up.
You see the same thing.
And
Ultimately,
inflation goes.
हाँ बोलो बोलो बोलो.
Yeah, inflation goes up, unemployment goes down,
Goes
employment
down
goes.
and employment goes up. Same thing, as I said. Money supply going up, interest rate goes down, private investment goes up, output demand goes up. Aggregate demand curve shifts upward. Firm is going to employ more labor to supply more output. And since aggregate demand goes up, price level goes up, it creates inflation. When the inflation goes up, unemployment goes down through Phillips curve. That's the entire story. Actually, जब मैं ऑफलाइन क्लास लेता था तो ये पूरा मैं ग्राफिकली दिखाता था. ISLM में क्या हुआ, उसके बाद एग्रीगेट डिमांड एग्रीगेट सप्लाई कर्व में क्या हुआ, उसके बाद प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन में क्या हुआ, लेबर डिमांड लेबर सप्लाई में क्या हुआ. That's it's a 4 or 5 diagram taken together and Phillips curve taken together, and that actually represents my entire economy. I used to do that in offline classes, but the online class is impossible, absolutely impossible. उतना diagram मैं draw नहीं कर पाऊंगा. So just a second. The book of Branson that I have suggested, if you get hold of it, that's a standard book to introduction to ISLM and complete Keynesian macro. तो तुम्हें मिलेगा ये पूरा diagram, and you see how the entire economy gets connected, how does this entire economy gets affected when a policy change takes place. Fiscal policy का भी वहाँ पे है. Government expenditure, taxation changes. What happens to this ISLM? What happens to the aggregate demand, aggregate supply? What happens to inflation? What happens to unemployment? What happens to labor demand, labor supply? ये पूरा एक साथ interact करता है. And I used to do that basically. And when Professor Mishra used to teach public finance, Professor Mishra also used to cover a little bit of that. Anyway, so since it's not there, it's a online class. Professor Mishra is not teaching public finance anymore. You guys have to pick it up. Help milega. Obviously, my student is going to take one ISLM 4-hour lecture. उसको बोला हूँ 2 hours 2 class लेगा. I think that will help you guys to see how the complete Keynesian works. Anyway, okay. Any question till now? Abhishek Kumar Singh.
Sir.
Any question?
No, sir, it's fine.
Acha, other department students. Somriddhi,
Yes, sir.
clear?
Yes, sir.
And Sachi Jalote. Not here, I think, absent. Anyway, so since you guys have no question till now, दूसरा example में जाते हैं. And then the new thing we'll learn. मैं graphically required reserves का change का impact क्या होता है और discount rate का change का impact क्या है, ऐसा सब हम लोग करेंगे. But before that, let us do another important, interesting exercise, which is called sterilization. ये वाला तो हम लोगों का हो गया. Then let me go to the problem 2. Okay, it's problem 3 here. Problem 2 में जाते हैं. Where is problem 2? That's problem 1. I went to problem 3. Where is problem 2? Oh, it's problem 2 नीचे चला गया. ए होने. ठीक है. So problem 2 को यहाँ पे देखते हैं. What happens to money supply and the composition of the balance sheet of the commercial bank and the central bank when foreign exchange reserves rises worth rupees 100? For some reason, foreign exchange reserves increase here. So there, let's say there are a lot of exporter who export a lot of stuff outside. They earn a lot of amount of dollar. They have given it to RBI. Foreign exchange reserves rises. See the implication over here. The same balance sheet. This is the balance sheet of the central bank, commercial bank. The foreign exchange reserves rises by 100 unit over here. Reserves rises by 100 unit over here. So asset equals to liability. High powered money rises. Reserves rises over here 100 unit. Deposit rises over here 200 unit. Loan rises over here 100 unit. Asset equals to liability in the commercial bank. Asset equals to liability in the central bank. And since high powered money rises by 100 unit, my money supply rises by 200 unit. The same thing over there. Foreign exchange reserves rises. Reserves in the liability side of the central bank rises. When the reserves in the liability side of the central bank rises, high powered money rises, and that's going to increase my money supply. In this numerical example, when required reserves ratio is 0.5, it's easy to calculate. If my reserves rises by 100 unit, my money supply is going to rise by 200 unit, and my deposit is going to rise by 200 unit because my currency in circulation is assumed to be 0. This is basically foreign exchange reserves, and this is a very interesting area when economy actually open up in India after 91, 92. There's a huge influx of foreign exchange reserves takes place, and that creates a huge increase in the money supply. And we know when money supply rises, what happens? It creates huge inflation. Aggregate demand curve shifts up, it creates inflation. And generally in the loss function of the central bank, there are two components, inflation and unemployment. Money supply rises, obviously the unemployment rate is going to go down, but on the other hand, inflation is going to go up, and we need a balance to that. Okay, so that balance got affected after 91, 92 economy opening up. There's a huge influx of foreign exchange reserves. As a result, money supply rises, expansionary monetary policy, output rises, employment rises, unemployment falls, but on the other hand, inflation also rises through Phillips curve a lot. And the balance got disrupted. And what should a government do here? There's a huge influx of foreign exchange reserves. Inflation rises, they want to control it. That means how do you want to control it? Do not allow, somehow they want to devise a policy such that the money supply does not increase so much. And this is basically over here. And this is known as sterilization. That means the foreign exchange reserves increases money supply. Government does something to decrease money supply to keep inflation under control. And what does this government do? देखो, this is sterilization. यहाँ पे दो पॉलिसी एक साथ काम करेगा. Foreign exchange reserves आएगा, open market operation भी एक साथ होगा. This is my initial balance sheet of commercial bank and central bank. What is happening over here? The first thing, foreign exchange influx. Change balance sheet of the central bank, foreign exchange reserves by 100 unit. Liability side reserves increased by 100 unit. High powered money increased by 100 unit. And in this money multiplied is 1 over RR. So money supply increased by 200 unit. So deposit increased by 200 unit over here. So loan increased by 100 unit over here. This is one thing, and this actually gives me, when the foreign exchange reserve rises by 100 unit, my money supply rises by 200 unit. Next part, ठीक से सुनो. Suppose government do not want money supply to increase by 200 unit. Suppose government want money supply to increase by, let's say, only 100 unit. Central bank does not want the foreign exchange reserves. Welcome, fine, but I have to do something so that even if there's a foreign exchange reserves coming by 100 unit worth, I do not allow my money supply to rise by 200 unit. What should I do? And here the open market operation comes up. What government calculates that if my reserves rises by 100 units, my money supply is going to rise by 200 unit automatically. So if I allow my reserves to rise only by 50 unit, then the money supply is going to decrease by 100 unit. And that's my objective. And this is exactly what government do. Central bank sell. This is the change balance sheet of the central bank. P minus 50. They're going to reduce bond holding by 50 unit. When they reduce bond holding by 50 unit, जो reserves 100 unit increase किया था वो 50 unit घट जाएगा. The reserves will be increased on the 50 units over here. There is a 50 units over here. There is a 50 unit over here. There is a 100 unit over here in the commercial bank. You see, reserves is R plus 50. Reserves is R plus 50. Delta R is 50. So delta R divided by RR, which is assumed to be by 0.5. It is 100. Bond. यहाँ से sell हुआ, यहाँ से खरीदा गया. So they sell. Central bank sells government bond to commercial bank. Ultimately, what is the impact? So money supply 200 unit increase किया था, वो 100 unit increase किया. तुम देखो यहाँ पे calculation वही है. Somewhere I have calculated this over here. This is my delta R 50 unit. This is called stabilization, and this is also central bank does quite frequently in the economy. That whenever the huge influx of foreign exchange reserves comes in the economy, they realize that money supply is going to rise. Foreign exchange reserves coming is welcome. Money supply rise is also welcome because it increases employment and output, but it has a downside also. It creates a huge inflation. It creates inflation. And the loss function of the central bank, they have to balance inflation and unemployment both. So money supply rise creates employment, reduces unemployment, but it also creates inflation. They should not allow inflation to go out of hand. So they always control that. They always control money supply. So this is the example of stabilization. When foreign exchange reserves comes in of 100 unit, money supply rises by 200 unit. But government does not want money supply to rise by 200 unit. Suppose they want money supply to rise by only 100 unit. They conduct a negative open market operation. Central bank. What is the negative open market operation? Central bank sell bond commercial bank. When central bank sells bond to commercial bank, the reserves falls down, high powered money falls down, money supply falls down. In this numerical example, we have seen that if you want to reduce your money supply by 100 unit, your reserves has to decrease by 50 unit because your required reserves ratio is assumed to be 0.5 in this example. So what central bank did, central bank sell 50 unit of bond to commercial bank. Impact, reserves of the commercial bank drops from 100 to 50, and as a result, the money supply drops from 200 to 100. Central bank controls it. So both policy. The foreign exchange reserves comes in, central bank does open market operation to control money supply. This is known as stabilization. And in 1992-93, when the economy opens up, this problem central bank faced, RBI faced actually. And RBI actually did a lot of stabilization at that time. In fact, so much so, RBI was out of government bond at that time. इतना bond वो sell किया commercial bank को, and the rate of rise in foreign exchange reserves was quite high, and the sterilization only through bond was not possible because the central bank did not have so much of bond to sell, and as a result central bank has to go to some other policy measures. वहां पे required reserves policy measure हुआ था, required reserves policy change हुआ था, they increases required reserves so that money multiplier goes down and the money supply goes down. If you see data of Indian central bank in RBI, you will see this 95, 96 at that period, bond was zero almost. There is nothing to sell, and to support that, I am out of bond. I need to reduce money supply. Alternative policies has been taken, and one of the policy was to increase required reserves, and I'll come to that, the graphical exposition to that. So is this sterilization clear? Sagar, Suman?
Yes.
Clear? Sterilization clear हुआ?
Yes.
No question?
No. Sir.
अच्छा तुम बोलो तो स्टेरिलाइजेशन में जो एग्जांपल मैं दिया था, फॉरेन एक्सचेंज रिजर्व्स 100 यूनिट का आया, डिपॉजिट 200 यूनिट का इंक्रीज किया, मनी सप्लाई 200 यूनिट का इंक्रीज किया. एग्जांपल में मैं बोला government wants to increase money supply by 100 units only. Suppose governments do not want money supply to increase at all. Delta M equals to 0. ये चाहता है, क्या करेगा? Obviously bond sell करेगा, पर कितना? So that in this example that I have given, initially when the foreign exchange reserves rises by 100 unit, money supply rises by 200 unit, government sterilize with the objective that the money supply do not increase to 200 unit but increases only to 100 units. यहाँ पे मैं दिखाया कैसे open market से हुआ. Now my question to you, suppose government does not want money supply to rise at all, even if there is a foreign exchange reserves coming by 100 unit. क्या करेगा?
And it will be B minus 100.
B minus 100. Very good. क्योंकि अगर यहाँ पे B minus 100 हो जाए, यहाँ पे R minus 100 हो जाएगा, राइट?
Yes.
कहाँ गया? या अगर यहाँ पे B minus 100 हो जाए, यहाँ पे R minus 100 हो जाएगा. So that will be correspondingly R minus 100 over here, right?
Yes. Yes.
And the delta D will be 0, right? तो 200 इंक्रीज किया था, 200 घट जाएगा.
Yes.
So you understood. Very good. So this is sterilization. When foreign exchange reserves is out of control, money supply is out of control. To control inflation, central bank often does open market operation to control money supply, and this is one of the example of that. In the real life situation, it happens in India after this liberalization 91-92, economy opens up, foreign exchange reserves coming up. The rate of coming of foreign exchange reserves was quite high. RBI did a lot of sterilization by selling government bond. RBI goes out of bond. Then RBI has taken alternative measures to reduce money supply. One of the measures is basically increasing required reserves. Data मिलेगा तुम्हें. If you go to RBI website and if you download the book, Handbook of Indian Economy, वहां से तुम्हें data मिल सकता है. They have a historical data. And we have seen yesterday that when the required reserves goes up, the money multiplier goes down without changing high powered money at all. High powered money remain unchanged. The RR goes up, mu goes down. That is my money multiplier. Money supply goes down. That's one of the tool government takes to control money supply. उसका भी एक graphical exposition होगा. It also has a graphical exposition. If I go over here, ये है उसका graphical exposition, required reserves का. So in this case of open market operation, when central bank purchase bond, reserves rises, there is a shift of reserve supply curve to the right side. This is increase in required reserves. So when the increase in required reserve takes place, the commercial bank starts demanding more reserves. So reserve demand curve goes up. So initially reserve demand curve is this blue line, RD1, market clearing interest at IFF1, non-borrowed reserve. This is the amount of reserves you have. Now, people demanding more reserves. RR rises. Graphically, reserve demand curve shifts up. So blue line to red line. Market clearing 0.2. Market clearing interest rate IFF2. No change in reserve. So there is no change in high powered money. As I said, when the required reserve changes, high powered money does not change at all. But the required reserves rises means money multiplier goes down and the money supply goes down. Money supply goes down means from the ISLM you see there's the upward rise of the LM curve and the interest rate rises. You see the same interest rate rise over here. Is a contractionary monetary policy, rising required reserves. Graphically, required reserves rises, reserves demand curve of the commercial bank goes up, market clearing point shifts from 0.1 to 0.2, nominal interest rate or interest rate goes from IFF1 to IFF2. Why it is happening? Because required reserves rises, high powered money remains completely unchanged because reserves does not rise in the economy at all, but the money multiplier falls down, money supply falls down because money supply equals to money multiplier multiplied by high powered money. High powered money unchanged, but the money multiplier falls down means money supply falls down. Now go to ISLM. What is happening over there? LM curve shifts up. When LM curve shifts up, interest rate rises, output falls down. You see the interest rate rise over here. That is basically graphically the impact of my rising required reserves. और जो chronologically मैं आया, as I said, open market operation पहले किया जाता है. Even the sterilization they used to do through open market operation first. When that is out of hand, generally, उसके बाद required reserves वाला policy आता है. And उसका reason भी है जो मैं next class में explain करूंगा that why open market operation is most widely used and why required reserves policy is not that widely used. Open market operation में अगर ना हो, then the second resort to the central bank is the required reserves over here. तो हम लोग उसको explain करेंगे. Graphically is this, numerically is this. So अगर मैं यहाँ पे जाऊं, my formula, my required reserves is the denominator of mu. When my required reserves rises, my money multiplier goes down, mu falls down and the money supply falls down. High powered money is not going to change. मैं कल भी बोला था high powered money में change नहीं करेगा because this composition of the balance sheet of the central bank does not change at all. और ये graph मुझे वही दे रहा है. My required reserves rises, reserves demand curve goes up, but ultimately reserve stock जो है NBR non borrowed reserves यहाँ पे वो change नहीं हो रहा है, इसलिए high powered money change नहीं हो रहा है. But money supply is going down only through the reduction of money multiplier. Impact ISLM में चले जाओ, LM curve shifts up. क्या मिल रहा है मुझे? Interest rate going up, output going down. क्यों? Interest rate going up means private investment is going down, output demand is going down. Firm is going to supply less output, firm will reduce employment. Okay, so this is the money supply falls means my aggregate demand curve falls down, which means my price level falls down, inflation falls down, my unemployment rises through Phillips curve, and that's the complete story. And this is it. So पहले open market operation में जाओ, control करने का कोशिश करो. If you are out of bond or you cannot do it, next resort is basically liquid reserves. Why it is the next resort, not the first resort? Next lecture. Any question? Navonil, fine.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Abhishek Kumar Singh, fine.
Sir.
Very good. Shivam Kumar, fine. Shivam. Shriyam Pandey. Shriyam, समझ में आ रहा है श्रीयम?
Yes, sir.
तुम दूसरे डिपार्टमेंट से हो, थोड़ा सा टाइम लगेगा.
Not completely. I'll have to brush up the ISLM.
ISLM छोड़ो, पर पहले वो तो हो जाएगा, ब्रश अप आएगा, तुम भी करोगे. पर ये कॉम्पोजिशन ऑफ बैलेंस शीट वाला जो हो रहा है सब समझ में आ रहा है ना?
हाँ, मतलब मुझे थोड़ा जो टर्म्स हैं उसको थोड़ा डेप्थ में देखना पड़ेगा.
ओके. श्रीमान वी.
Yes, sir.
फाइन.
Yes.
वेदिका गुप्ता.
Yes, sir.
Any question?
No, sir.
Clear?
Yes, sir.
Very good. ठीक है. Then if you have no question anymore today, then I will end the lecture over here today. So practice it. It's not difficult. एक दो बार प्रैक्टिस करोगे तो हो जाएगा. और जब प्रैक्टिस करोगे ये बैलेंस शीट ड्रॉ करो और रिजर्व डिमांड रिजर्व सप्लाई वाला भी ड्रॉ करो, उसके साथ ISLM भी ड्रॉ करो और एक साथ देखो whether each analysis, this balance sheet analysis, the reserves demand, reserves supply graphical analysis, and the ISLM graphical analysis, are they compatible or not, whether they are giving you the same story or not. Then the things will be more clear to you. You have 1 week to do that. We'll meet again when? When's the next class? I think on Monday, right? At 3 o'clock, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, since no question today, no clarification, then again we will meet on Monday at 3 o'clock. Thank you for attending. I'm ending the lecture over here today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye, sir.